Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members of the Board of Supervisors, CEO Svet Johnson, Dr. Johnson, staff. Rob Mullane with the Resource Management Agency. I'm going to just have some very brief comments, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ruben Barrera, our building official. This is the 3-year cycle for updating the building code. So this came back, this was an item that came to you 3 years ago with quite a bit of amendments, local amendments. It's an opportunity to incorporate local amendments along with the state requirements into the building code. This time around, we were actually precluded from making very many changes to the building code, local amendments, because of state legislation that was recently signed by the governor. So it was really geared towards wildfire victims to give them a lower cost and more certainty in their rebuild efforts. And what that, and Ruben will talk about it in a little bit more detail, but that legislation precluded local agencies from making changes to the residential building code. So our changes this time around, this 3-year cycle, are there's not a lot of new material. What we do have in there are some administrative changes that we feel make it easier for our clients, the folks that are coming in requesting building permits, including our internal clients at the county for capital improvement projects. So we have some customer service oriented local amendments that Ruben will talk in more detail about. And other than that, it's largely adopting previous local amendments, readopting those, and adopting the latest state requirements. So with that, I will turn it over to Ruben, and we'll both be available for questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Parvin and members of the board. Good afternoon, Dr. Johnson. Thank you, Rob. I'm here to present to you the updates to the Ventura County Building Code for 2025. And these updates, if adopted by your board, become effective in January 2026. For this presentation, I'm going to be referring to the Ventura County Building Code as a VCBC, just for brevity. So the VCBC is the county's building code, and it regulates construction of all buildings and structures through state and local regulations. There are 2 sets of standards. One is state standards, which are formerly known as the California Building Standards Code, and the other is the local amendments that we adopt in Ventura County, which are also building standards, but they are the local standards or local amendments to the state standards. The code also provides guidance for the enforcement and administration of these standards and the building safety program through building safety and the building permit issuance process. So I'm going to be going over just some background and like a very general overview for brevity, but hopefully that'll give you some time to ask questions at the end of my presentation. So generally, the code adoption process is a 3-year code cycle, which Rob mentioned. Currently, we are using the 2022 VCBC that became effective on January 2023. When adopted, this code will become effective on January 1, 2026, and it applies to new building permit applications submitted on or after the effective date of January 1st. So what are building standards? Building standards are regulations that we use for the engineering design of buildings and structures, which include structural design, electrical and mechanical engineering design for building systems. It also includes the review and permitting process and procedures that we use to issue building permits. It also regulates the construction and materials used during construction, as well as installation and testing of fixed equipment in buildings. These standards also include inspection standards during construction, as well as the certification of these buildings when they are completed in the field. So what is the criteria that is required by the state for amending the state building standards? Well, there are 2 general criteria that we must follow in order to amend the state requirements. One is that the local amendment cannot be less restrictive than the state standard. And the second is that the amendment must address one of the following 3 local conditions. our local climate, our local geology, or our local topography. So both of these standards 1 and 2 have to be met in order to amend the building code with a building standard. So an example of some of the local conditions in Ventura County that we have used in the past for amending the state provisions are, for example, we have hot, dry climate, Santa Ana winds, and steep canyons and hillsides that make it very hazardous in certain areas of the county for the propagation of brush fires. So we've adopted specific requirements in the building code locally that surpass those requirements of the state to address these conditions and make the buildings in these areas more resilient during these fires. We also have areas in the county that have, I would say, somewhat elevated levels of radon, which is a naturally occurring gas. It's hazardous to our health. And so buildings that are constructed in those areas have to meet certain venting requirements to ensure that the radon doesn't accumulate inside the house and create a health hazard for the occupants. We also have geologic hazards in certain mountain areas and the coastline, such as La Conchita and other areas with steep canyons and hillside, as well as other geotechnical hazards or soil hazards, such as liquefaction near the beach, soil erosion, and expansive soils. And so because of these things, we typically will enforce more restrictive provisions of the state for buildings in those areas. We also have several significant active earthquake faults, such as the Ventura Fault, the Oak Ridge Fault, San Cayetano Fault, and what is that? Anyway, there's several others that I can't remember exactly where they are. But anyway, these are they're active faults. And so any buildings that are constructed near those areas have to meet certain standards. And so we do have some provisions that are stricter than the state provisions for addressing buildings constructed in these areas. Okay, so this is a listing, a very general listing of our current local amendments, which we are proposing to continue from the 2022 code to the 2025 code. And these are provisions for radon control. These were adopted by this board in 2022. Grading provisions, which were adopted a long time ago. I want to say before 2016, but it's probably more like 15 or 20 years ago. Private sewage disposal systems for sites that are not served by a public sewer, as well as private swimming pools and property maintenance provisions that are part of the adoption of an international code, and foundation design provisions for hillside buildings to ensure those are going to be safe during large earthquakes, as well as retrofitting existing older buildings in fire hazard areas. These were adopted in 2022, as well as buildings constructed close to tall slopes, near tall slopes, meaning closer than 30 feet to the edge of that slope, which was also adopted in 2022. And most recently in 2024, the board adopted voluntary all-electric provisions to supersede the mandatory all-electric provisions that were adopted in 2022. So those all-electric voluntary provisions are still in effect now and are due to expire at the end of this year. As Rob mentioned earlier, State Assembly Bill 130 was signed by the governor in June of this year, and it prohibits new standards for residential units to be incorporated into this new code, but there are some exceptions. The existing standards, or any existing standards in effect by September 30th, by today, can be continued by the exceptions of that bill. So we're proposing to continue those provisions that we've adopted, that the board has adopted in the past. So in essence, the proposed updates for this 2025 VCBC comply with Assembly Bill 130. So what are the proposed new amendments for 2025? Well, there are no significant new local building standards. The state does have a few changes, but these are local amendments that we are addressing here. And we have nothing that is new other than some revisions and clarifications to existing language and formatting for the 2025 VCBC. We've also updated references in the VCBC to align with the new state codes, which changed drastically. For example, the state now created or adopted a new code, the WUI code, the Wildland Urban Interface Code, which we enforce Chapter 5 of that code, previously Chapter 7A in the Building Code. Now it will be Chapter 5 in the WUI code, enforced by Building Safety. So we had to make the necessary changes to the references in our VCBC to Chapter 7A and switch those to Chapter 5 in the WUI code. We also are proposing several customer service related administrative changes, such as longer expiration periods for building permit applications, longer expiration periods for demolition permits, and more relaxed provisions for agricultural produce stands. And that's why those are in yellow, because those are more necessary because of customer service requirements. The longer expiration period for building permits, we're proposing to go from a 12-month expiration period to 18 months for those permits to expire from the date of application. And the expiration for demolition permits is proposed to be changed from 30 days to 6 months. And that is just to give customers a little bit more time to complete their grading or complete their coordination with their contractors and do the work that they need to do to prepare to begin construction. And a lot of permit applications had been expiring. Some demolition permits had expired, and we end up having to extend these permits because in most cases they are legitimate reasons why the customer needs an extension. We're also proposing to extend the incentives for voluntary all-electric buildings, which are just some incentives and fee reductions of certain fees for those customers who choose to voluntarily install all-electric appliances and equipment in their new buildings. As I mentioned earlier, that expiration period for that incentive is the end of this year, December 31st. And under this new ordinance, we're proposing to extend that period for 3 additional years through the end of 2028. Okay. We did have a public input and participation process to receive public input for changes, revisions, clarifications to the code where it was somewhat confusing or just unclear. And we've been doing that for the last 3 years, actually. We have a general folder where the public can send us emails suggesting and recommending changes to the 2025 code. And we've taken some of those into consideration. A lot of the changes we are making to the format or some of the language that is not intended to be coordinating with the state. It's just intended to clarify it based on recommendations from the public or from our staff. Some of the proposed code revisions were not accepted, however, if they did not meet the state criteria for the local amendments or if they did not meet one of the exemptions for the criteria that's provided under Assembly Bill 130, or if they had no material positive effect on customer service or public safety. Also, if the proposed amendment would not improve the code language for better understanding by the public or improve the administration or enforcement of existing standards that were generally not really necessary, so we're not adding any changes to the code if we didn't think it met one of those criteria. So there were several things that we just decided to not recommend to the board to do. That is a very general presentation and background, and I'm obviously here to answer any questions you may have and give you more detail if necessary. Staff recommendation is to open the public hearing, introduce and read the VCBC ordinance in title only, to receive public testimony and waive further reading, and to continue the matter for a second public hearing on November 18th, together with a resolution to adopt the express findings of local conditions for our current amendments so that they can be continued into 2025. And with that, I will be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I'm going to open the public hearing. Questions? Supervisor Levere?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Barrera, for this, all this work and this update. Can you just provide a little more clarity on what was, what's being proposed when you talk about relaxing the provisions for the agricultural produce stands? Because I think that's important.
Yes, for produce stands, we did two, I would say, significant changes to those. One is we relaxed the distance that was required from the proposed new produce stand to the property lines. It was 30 feet. We changed it to 10 feet. So now you can actually build those a little bit closer to the property line. And the reason we did that was because for that type of use, if it were a normal building, you can actually build it closer to the property line than 30 feet, and that was kind of restrictive. The other thing that we did was we changed the definition of, actually we changed the heading of that section to call them agricultural product stands instead of agricultural produce stands, because sometimes customers felt, and even some staff, the question was, can I sell products other than produce, such as honey or nuts or flowers? And we said, well, that's not necessarily produce, but I think the intent of the board was to allow those types of products to be for sale, made for sale in these. These are very simple and very rudimentary structures, and we wanted to extend that definition or modify that definition a little bit so that it would allow those vendors to use those provisions, which are generally more relaxed provisions for those types of buildings than they would be for a normal building.
Great. Thank you.
Quick question about, there was a comment from, I think it was from COLA, but I'm not sure who sent it, but they were talking about the term disturbed area versus area to be graded. Is that something you're addressing?
Yes, we actually addressed that. We discussed that with the Public Works Department, who is a department, Public Works agency, and they have their General Services Department who enforces those provisions. They just happen to be in the Building Code. And the answer was that those provisions do not apply to farms, or they apply to development, and they included language there so that I think it's referred to as the area of the development. So to them, a development is a tract, a parcel map, or construction of homes and things like that. It's not for farming.
Okay, good. So it's clarified.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, actually, I did just wonder, is there any opportunity for us to do less than what the state requires?
Okay, the answer is no. The state is very clear in the Government Health and Safety Code, government section, I can't remember the number of the section, but it is very clear that we cannot be less restrictive than the state provisions. We can only be more restrictive, and only in those cases where there is an existing local condition that warrants a more restrictive approach. So we have been careful to not do more than we should be doing in terms of code adoption language.
And I appreciate that. I'm saying that I knew the answer, but I need you to say it because of our public needs to know that. I know I've been asking to make sure that we're not proceeding far beyond what the state is doing. I think it's extremely important that we're supporting our residents and our businesses to do the best they can. I think that our state rules and regulations are quite restrictive already. And so I really do appreciate that comment, and to make sure people hear that we are really trying not to go beyond. And so I also wanted to say, not a question, but an appreciation of the longer expiration periods. I think that was very needed. And for the permit applications, for the demo targets, it's really important. Also with the agriculture product stands, when you say agriculture products, it's only honey, it's only jam. Can they sell water too? I mean, I just wondered.
It's actually anything that the planning division and the health department will approve.
Good.
But when you say agricultural product, then anything is open. As long as it's approved by planning, we will accept it, and there's no questions asked. Whereas before, if it was produce, then that question came up, and we said, wait a minute, the health department is approving maybe, I don't know, something else other than a produce, but in our codes, it was restricted to only produce. So now this will relax it a little bit, and as long as it's approved, we will honor it.
Great, and I appreciate that because it provides more guidance to our staff when reviewing what's at the stand and making sure that we have more flexibility for that. So I appreciate that. And being closer to the home, I think, is important too. The one thing I had with, like, we've even had questions on the pools. And so to note that we're not farther than the state on any pool regulation, I think is important. We just had a group come to us about a shuffleboard that was in the fence line of the pool, and that we can't have a shuffleboard inside the pool because there's not a shuffleboard outside of the fence. And like, it's rules like this that I just do not understand.
We don't have a provision in the current code that addresses that. It only states that you must have certain safety measures to prevent children from leaving the house or leaving another property adjacent to your home and going onto your property and accidentally falling in the pool. But you can have a lot of things on that pool deck, but you just can't allow access into the pool deck area without these safety measures. An example of that would be door alarms. You can have door alarms, or you can have a fence around the pool, including the shuffleboard area, or you can have a motion sensor, a detector of a sort in the water, so that if somebody falls in, the motion activates an alarm that sounds in the house. You don't need all of those. You just need two things. Usually it's a property line fence and maybe door alarms, or it could also be, for example, self-closing doors. And, I think the door hardware has to be mounted at a certain height so a child can't reach it and open the door on their own. So, but yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then also the fact that we're extending the incentive of the voluntary all-electric buildings, but it's not mandatory.
Correct.
So if you're building new property, it is not mandatory to do all-electric. You could get a voluntary, but not mandatory.
Correct.
So I just wanted to say there's a lot of work that has gone through this to try to be very thoughtful and intentional. I just wanted to appreciate it and show my support. So thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any speakers on this item?
Thank you, Chair Parpin. We currently have one speaker who's joining us in person. Nick, if you proceed to the podium, you'll have 3 minutes to give your comment.
Good afternoon. I'd like to say thank you for my fellow citizens to allow us this time to speak. Ruben just did a really good presentation. Hundreds of local amendments have been approved by all of you over the last code cycles. They're all way more restrictive than the state of California requires. And they're all gonna appears to be carried forward even after our state said, hey, you guys, we're not that special. Quit putting more regulations on your local farmers. It's not good. You're putting hundreds of regulations. Actually, it's really smooth because you don't even have to put them on now. All you need to do is rubber stamp what you've rubber stamped the last 3 code cycles. And I've been telling you this for 4 years. And you still want to carry all this stuff forward and dump it on us. I'm a citizen of Camarillo. I'm a farmer. You had a very poignant question. Why, if the area of disturbance doesn't apply to agriculture, and I got a citation under the building code from a building official using the title unlawfully, called the Director of Public Works, who I've sent a cease and desist letter to and copied each and every one of you, and the other attorney, Tiffany North, never heard back. I'd take the fifth of them all if I were you guys too. I definitely haven't sent it to the doctor because I know she has a lot on her plate and she was new when I started this. But you know what? And somebody under her handled it. Anyway, I only get, how many minutes do I get?
You have 1 minute
58 seconds left? Yeah, that's a good deal. Of the hundreds of amendments California Building Code presented here today, my 3 minutes only allows me time to comment on 2 issues. First, California housing law and California building standards law, which he's very well versed in, says that there's only 3 conditions. 3 conditions: climate, administrative isn't one. We can't change the California law, health and safety code, because the county thinks there's an administrative need to do it. It doesn't say you can do it in the law. You can only do it for climate. He did a very good job. He told you the 3 things. When Ruben opened up, it's about buildings. There's no agriculture anywhere in those first 3 things that he put up there. There's no agriculture in there. How's the building code
Thank you, Mr. Nick, for your comment. If you'd like, I could take that for you and distribute it to the board.
I've sent the board hundreds of pages.
Thank you very much. Chair Parvin, there are no other requests to speak for this item. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, close the public hearing.
All right, item number 41, motion to approve staff recommendations has been moved by Supervisor Parvin, second by Supervisor Lopez. I will read the title of this ordinance into record. An ordinance of the County of Ventura updating the Ventura County Building Code and adopting by reference the most current editions of the following state building standard codes and international model codes with certain appendices, together with amendments thereto: California Building Code, California Residential Code, California Electrical Code, California Mechanical Code, California Plumbing Code, California Energy Code, California Wildland Urban Interface Code, California Historical Building Code, California Existing Building Code, California Green Building Standard Code, the International Property Maintenance Code, and International Swimming Pool and Spa Code. Thank you. Please vote. Oh, it's not cooperating again. Sorry about that. And that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item is public hearing to consider approval of 1, updates to the Ventura County Initial Study Assessment Guidelines, Ventura County